Good morning, everyone. I'm Assemblyman Robert Smullen, representing the 118th Assembly District, which represents the Mohawk Valley in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. I'm proud to be standing here alongside my colleagues in the Assembly, as well as the fierce fentanyl advocates that I have to my left and right, to introduce the Fentanyl Fathers and Mothers Act. Sadly, it's been well established in New York State that parents are losing their children at alarming rates due to drug overdoses. Many of those overdose deaths involve fentanyl and similar synthetic opioids and counterfeit pills. According to a 2022 report from the Office of the New York State Comptroller, synthetic opioids like fentanyl and tramadol accounted for much of the increase in drug overdose fatalities in New York, growing from 11% of all drug overdose deaths in 2010 to 78% in 2021. That is an astounding increase. In many cases, teens and young adults believe they are purchasing one drug, when in reality, that drug is mixed with other illicit substances or is something else entirely. Dealers often advertise the drug falsely, and a fake pill mixed with fentanyl can be deadly if an amount even as small as the tip of a pencil is accidentally ingested. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the number of opioid-related deaths that occurred between 2018 and 2024 in New York State was nearly 30,000. Can you believe that, ladies and gentlemen? 30,000 deaths in New York State alone due to opioids. The vast majority of these deaths involved non-methadone synthetic opioids, which is the category that includes fentanyl, its derivatives, and similar synthetic opioids like carfentanil. In 2022, there were 6,358 deaths in New York State. That's the latest date that we have year-long statistics. But that's more people than were killed in 9/11 and in the entire campaign in Afghanistan after 9/11. Think about it. Synthetic opioids like fentanyl are not only the prime driver of overdoses in New York State, but also the rest of the United States. From January 31st, 2020 to January 31st, 2021, 1 year, overdose deaths involving opioids rose by 38% nationwide. During that same period, overdose deaths involving synthetic opioids, primarily illicit manufactured fentanyl, rose by 55% nationwide. In fact, the average monthly overdose deaths among young people in the U.S. aged 10 to 19 have increased by 109% from 2019 to 2021. This is unacceptable and needs to be addressed now. To save young lives, we must stop the flow of fentanyl into our state and our nation. And we must spread awareness on the dangers of fentanyl and other illicit substances. This bill, our proposal, will provide a comprehensive educational requirement for youth and young adults to learn about the potentially fatal consequences of such illicit, illegal, and deadly substances. To protect our young people and preserve our families and communities, it is our honor today to introduce the Fentanyl Fathers and Mothers Act. To do that, we have gathered some advocates and like-minded legislators here today, and I want to thank my colleagues for attending. But next up, I want to introduce a special person in my world, a bereaved father of a fine young man who accidentally poisoned himself. Please let me introduce you to Greg Swan, the founder of fentanylfathers.org. Greg?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Assemblyman Smullen. I really trust your motives as a bereaved father recently, and I'm so sorry for your own loss of AJ. And I'm proud to be standing here next to Sharon, mother of Vincent. I'm representing Sasha, who died last year at the age of 14 in New York City. I am born in Buffalo. We don't always get credit for being part of New York, except around NFL playoff time, but I am from there. And I lost my son, Drew. He was 24 years old. He took an unprescribed pill, and I got a phone call at 12:30 at night from my son, Jack, saying, "Dad, are you sitting down? Are you sitting down?" I said, "No, I'm sleeping. What's going on?" He goes, "I need you to be sitting down right now." And I stood up in bed, and shock came over me, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Drew's dead." Drew was my firstborn, the flower of my youth, and I poured everything I knew about life that my mother taught me into him, and we were best friends. And he was a Abercrombie model. He was a state champion as a swimmer, as a freshman, MVP of his tennis team, and he had it going on. It wasn't fair to be Drew. But our message to kids as we go through the high schools, and New York has 1,279 high schools, and we want to get into every one of them and train these kids how real this is. To not act on this as we're doing today is to be complicit in the death of another 3,500 New York, mostly young kids. That's what's going on. It's not, gosh, should I get behind this issue? It's no, should you get behind the death of these kids, or are you going to take some action? We need to get this thing passed. We need to have teachers be open. We get a lot of pushback from teachers. They say, we don't have a drug problem. I'm like, New York has a drug problem. America has a drug problem. There's 107,000 dying from fentanyl every year. We talked about more than 9/11. You take drunk driving, global plane crashes, COVID up to the age of, under the age of 30, childhood cancer, cancer up to the age of 40, and a lot of other categories that could be added up, and it's less than 1 year's worth of fentanyl. You can tack on Vietnam to that, 58,000 deaths. Add all that up, it's less than 1 year dying from fentanyl, mostly young. And so it's a stunning thing. We love our bereaved parents. We tell them, get back in the game, kid. Your kid's life isn't over. You need to go and save others on their behalf. Children and high schoolers are maybe bad at being experienced, but they're great at one thing. They recognize authenticity. And when we start our assembly, which the DEA has partnered with, the NFL has done some public service announcements with us. When we start our assembly, we say, hey kids, I'm here on a sad mission. They look up and I say, I lost my son to this. Once I say that, we have their attention and we give them a riveting 45-minute assembly presentation. When we're done, they're more likely to drink gasoline than they go near an unprescribed pill. They're very clear. They're like, I'm going to go out of this world some way, but I ain't going out that way. And too many of them are, ignorance is what's killing these kids. So they're walking off the plank like a Peter Pan's ship and jumping into the sharks. These pills are Adderall, Xanax, Oxycontin, and some other ones, and Percocet. And the other thing that is suspect now is the marijuana supply is definitely tainted. It's not your father's weed anymore. This is a new batch of poisoned drugs, and people had better beware. And so we're letting them know. We're not telling them, hey, go to Boy Scouts and church. We're telling them, this is life and death. And the number one motive for young high schoolers is they don't want to do this to their mama. Thank you for being open to this. Invite us into your schools. We're fentanylfathers.org, and we want to save kids in the name of our own kids. Thank you so much.
It's powerful stuff. When a parent stands before students, students will listen. It's not about science, it's about the emotion and the human connection of our people. And it is the best way that we in New York State, around this country, can reduce the chances of our children taking fentanyl. Next up is our ranker, Keith Brown, who's going to talk about his work in this regard. Keith? Thanks.
Thank you, Colonel Smullen. It's a pleasure to join you on this important initiative. I'm speaking today not only as the Minority Conference Ranking Republican on the Assembly Committee of Alcoholism and Substance Use, but also as a father and someone who fully understands the emotional toll that the current fentanyl crisis is taking on families. The importance of including fentanyl education in our schools is not a political issue. These tragedies are happening in every community across the nation. I lost my nephew, Jesse Romanowski, 4 weeks shy of his 20th birthday from a deadly fentanyl overdose. Jesse was just like any other teenager from Northport. After graduating high school, he was working at UPS and going to college, and he was reffing soccer on the weekends. His death and the deaths of a whole generation of kids was wholly preventable. But it starts with educating our kids and giving them the skills to better cope with adversity, anxiety, and depression. We now know there's a strong connection between drug use and underlying mental health challenges like stress, anxiety, and depression. Today's students need more than academics. They need proper social, emotional environment. They need to feel accepted. They need a safe place to discuss what they are going through. That's the underlying reason why they're using drugs and alcohol to cope with their problems. They need practical, life-saving information about the dangers of synthetic opioids and counterfeit pills, from the use of Narcan to the use of fentanyl test strips. My nephew's path to substance use is all too typical today. He had another side of him, a dark side. He started vaping at 14. He started vaping pot at 15. He was going to pill parties by 16, and he was using cocaine and heroin by 18, and dead by 20. This measure, introduced by Colonel Smullen, is a call for school-based instruction that also teaches emotional coping skills, stress management, and where to go for help. Prevention must go beyond warning signs. It must include mental and emotional support. In my nephew Jesse's case, my sister told me after his death that she was convinced that he had bipolarism that went completely undiagnosed. That's why it's so important we educate our kids and teach them empathy so students understand the broader consequence of their action and how substance use affects every one of their loved ones and the community as a whole. Emotional awareness can be a deterrent to drug use. This is not a partisan issue. This is about protecting our kids and saving lives. I urge my fellow lawmakers, school officials, and families to come together to support this common sense, compassionate legislation. We need immediate action to get ahead of the epidemic rather than continue to react to the lives lost. That's why the time is right for this bill, Fentanyl Fathers and Mothers Act. It is long overdue. This bill is aimed to get more fathers and mothers talking about drug use, talking about the stigma and reducing the stigma. You know, in my sister's case, she was so ashamed to talk to her brother and her siblings about my nephew's drug use that for a long time we had no idea that my nephew was struggling. The message is that you are not alone with your struggle, with your child, with substance use. There is help. Just reach out, talk to someone. And that's why it's so important that the bereaved parents are going into schools and talking to the children and saying to them, hey, there's a better way, right? Just reach out. By sharing their stories, more fathers and mothers will come out and talk about their struggle and get the support they need. My hope is that with this legislation, state agencies like the Office of Mental Health, OASAS, the Department of Health, the State Education Department will do more work collaboratively to mandate comprehensive fentanyl and co-occurring disorder education and awareness to reduce the number of fentanyl overdoses, save lives, and prevent further tragedy due to fentanyl and synthetic opioid use. Thank you again, Colonel. Oh, yes, sorry. I'll have you. Now, it is my esteemed pleasure to introduce not only my friend, but my neighbor, and an advocate and a champion from our community, Northport Huntington. Sharon has been a fifth grade teacher for over 24 years. In her work as an educator, she has co-advised community service and anti-bullying clubs, mentored teachers, and supported at-risk students. After losing her only child, her son Vincent, at age 25 to fentanyl poisoning, she's become a proponent for those who struggle with addiction, mental health, and co-occurring disorders. She started as an advocate, coming up to Albany to stop stigma and speak with legislators on the importance of mental health parity and addiction equity. Sharon is currently working with Northwell Health on Long Island, developing training curricula for school-based professionals that focuses on communication strategies for teachers, parents, and students, as well as identifying risky substance use indicators. Sharon?
Sorry. Good morning. My name is Sharon Richmond. I've been an educator for over 2 decades, and I am the mom of my son, Vincent, my only child, who died of a fentanyl poisoning at age 25. Vincent was smart, kind, funny, and anybody he met absolutely adored him. Teachers talked about how he brought conversations to the next level. Yet my son never felt good about himself. He struggled with anxiety and depression, which eventually led him to using drugs. When fentanyl was still an unfamiliar word to most of us, Vincent was fighting with everything he had to stay drug-free, but he faced overwhelming barriers to access to treatment for inpatient care. During the 1 year that he tried, 4 times he got denied. This left him unknowingly going after more drugs because he couldn't get the help he wanted, and it was unfortunately laced with fentanyl. No parent should ever have to endure that kind of loss. That's why I passionately support the Fathers and Mothers Fentanyl Act, a landmark legislation requiring every New York school, private, public, and charter schools, to teach appropriate, comprehensive fentanyl awareness. This isn't just an opioid crisis or a health crisis. It's a crisis in silence. As educators and parents, we stand at a crossroad. We either need to be proactive or reactive. Today, too many people are reactive to tragedy, overdose, and mourning the loss of a child. This act empowers us to prevent, to reach every student before trauma enters their lives. Prevention begins with education. Studies show effective prevention blends knowledge and tools, from sharing coping strategies to social emotional resilience. Our children must know what fentanyl is and how it is hidden in drugs and pills people think are safe are not safe, how to protect themselves and their friends, how to ask for help, how to resist peer pressure, and how to choose better paths that align with being healthier and safer lives. If this education had been around when my son Vincent was alive, I believe he would still be here today. We can turn personal tragedy into collective strength. We can turn our pain into power. Let's give our students not just facts, but the language they need to speak up and the courage they need to seek help and feel and look like a whole, healthy person. Let's act before it's too late. Our children's lives are at stake. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon and Greg and Keith and all my colleagues here. This is obviously a very important issue in which we can act. Not only legislators, but school administrators, parents. We don't need a law to do all this, but what we need is good common sense and good wisdom to share it from those who have walked before, the bereaved parents, and those students who we may be able to save from this scourge of fentanyl, which is attacking us here in New York. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that the press may have.
I'm curious how this would be different from the DARE program or other existing drug abuse education programs that are, if not mandated, certainly more prevalent in our schools.
Great question. I'll let Greg tell you what the secret sauce is.
DARE was a successful program. The problem with DARE is it wasn't run by bereaved parents. Kids, the DEA would tell us, hey, it's the DEA with a deck lecturing kids about drugs. It's a cliche they can barely afford to pay attention to. People like Sharon and I walk in, kids know authenticity, and it's sad for them. They're emotive, and they feel the pain of a lost parent, and then we have their attention. The man with an experience is never at the mercy of a person with an argument. Nobody can argue with me that I lost my kid. So they really, really pay attention. There's more than enough bereaved parents to go around. There's 40 bereaved parents for every single high school. And we all want to make our kids' life count. So there's no problem. We have an angel army of over 1 million bereaved parents since 2019 in this country, and they're willing to tell their story and, of course, give the facts and do things like spray naloxone in public, which I'm going to do right now for you. The reason we do that is to take away the thought that it's a dangerous drug. It's a lifesaver. We teach them how to recognize, respond to an overdose, and they lock in. And speaking of peer pressure, at our front page, we give away a book called 1001 Great Comebacks to Peer Pressure. And it was started by my son, Drew, and it's available for download for free for all of our students, and they're able to throw zingers back at people trying to kill them.
Thanks, Craig.
I'm just wondering, do you get pushback? Are there districts that you try to get in that aren't interested? And if so, you know, the program sounds great. It's great that it's getting traction, but like, is a mandate needed, or can you just spread the program?
That's a great program, a great question. It's almost like I paid you to ask it, but the problem is the administrators, there's a competitiveness among high schools, and they don't want to bring attention to their drug problem. They're still in denial, like the lack of awareness that naloxone is safe and it's not harmful. We get pushback all the time, and we can do it the nice way, we can do it the easy way, we can do it the hard way. We can. We've gone to schools. We've done 200 schools. We've interviewed 200,000 students, and we've collected data on them. And one principal was ghosting us, and 3 months later, a kid died in his school, 17. His dad's driving around putting awareness things on his back window. I'm like, did you know we approached that school on your behalf? And then in the fall, a girl overdosed in that school. Well, the media was very interested in that. It happened to be in the state of Florida, and that principal was exposed. We don't play nice. Our kids are dying. So we can do this the smart way, the common sense way. We can do this with media. We can do this through the healthcare teacher. There's 100 ways to skin a cat to get into that school. But we've broken through, and once we do, we have gushing responses from the principals. That was the greatest thing we ever had. It was the most important assembly we had this year.
Follow-on questions? Thank you all for coming. We're very grateful. Thank you.